name is.
Tommy Robinson was just let out of prison after serving 3 months of what was supposed to be a 13-month sentence for contempt of court, which is the perfect opportunity to talk about contempt of court. Let's go for a walk. Alright, for those of you who don't know who Tommy Robinson is, he is a British political activist or right-wing extremist, depending on who you ask. In May, he was sentenced to 13 months in jail. For contempt of court, he was tried, convicted, and sentenced within 5 hours of the alleged act of contempt. Let's go. Alright, so Tommy Robinson is a very controversial character, to say the least. And the purpose of this video is not to take a position on him as an individual or any of his politics. The purpose of this video, because it is a law vlog, is to discuss the issue of contempt of court, how it applied to him, and how it applies in general, because it is a tremendously interesting topic, and the circumstances surrounding his trial, conviction, and sentencing for contempt within a 5-hour period, a sentence of 13 months in prison. At the time it occurred, it was mind-blowing, and I thought it was inaccurate or fake news. He was recently released from prison because his conviction was overturned in appeal, something I predicted at the time, but this is a particularly interesting starting point to talk about contempt of court, how it applies, what it is, and a concrete example of how you can end up in jail for contempt of court. Contempt of court is basically the power of the court to ensure that its authority is respected. It's the power of the court to ensure that its judgments are respected and that decorum is respected in the court. Which brings us to the two types of contempt that exist. You have contempt ex facie and contempt in facie. In facie literally meaning in the judge's face, ex facie literally meaning not in the judge's face. For examples of in facie contempt: assaulting someone in the courtroom, neglecting or refusing to turn off your cell phone despite multiple requests from the judge. Basically, in facie contempt is egregiously contemptuous or disrespectful conduct in the courtroom or in front of a judge. Up you go. 2, 3, up. I need you guys to move. Thank you. Go, play. Ex facie contempt is done out of the presence of the judge, typically involves violating the terms of a judgment, an injunction, a final judgment, ordering someone to do or not to do something, and that person continues to do or to not do that which the order told them to not do or do. Examples: failure to destroy copies of pirated material. Those dogs make it very difficult to work. Examples include failure to destroy copies or illegal reproductions of copyrighted work, failure to stop downloading music illegally, failure to stop harassing your neighbor. One field of law where contempt abounds: family law. When people get emotionally invested in divorce proceedings, they stop acting rationally and they get themselves into trouble. I'm gonna get to one of those cases later. It's over the top. Okay, I'll get to it now. A man spent 14 years in prison for refusing or failing to disclose where his assets were in the context of a divorce so that his wife could have her fair share in the divorce. 14 years in prison. We'll come back to this later. Now, contempt proceedings are what we call quasi-criminal proceedings. Quasi-criminal because they're not criminal infractions technically speaking, but because they can result in the person being imprisoned, being deprived of their very freedom, they are treated with the same severity and strictness as are criminal proceedings. And that is where we get into the Tommy Robinson condemnation. A bit of the context: Tommy Robinson, political activist or right-wing extremist, was previously convicted of contempt for recording in court while he was covering a notoriously infamous situation of grooming gangs in the United Kingdom. Apparently, he was recording in the courthouse, was told to stop on multiple occasions, did it again, and was convicted of contempt of court. Apparently, he was given a suspended sentence, so he didn't actually go to jail for his first condemnation. May 2018 comes around, and the defendants are about to be sentenced in this trial that's been going on for a long time. There is a blanket gag order by the judge of no reporting on the trial. For right or for wrong, agree or disagree with it, there is a blanket order, no reporting on the trial. Tommy Robinson is outside the courthouse live streaming on Facebook, is arrested that day on the basis of breaching an order of the court not to report on the trial, tried, convicted, and sentenced within 5 hours and sent to jail for 13 months. The entire situation screamed of absolute injustice, regardless of what you think about Tommy as an individual, as a political activist, as a right-wing extremist. And as a lawyer, I was utterly blown away that something like this could occur. Trials, convictions, sentencing to over a year in prison within 5 hours. There are only a handful of countries in which I can imagine something like that happening, and one of them is North Korea. Alright, quasi-criminal procedure, meaning when someone is accused, they have to be summoned before the judge. Now, in facie, contempt means you're already in front of the judge, so you don't need to be summoned. Ex facie, when it's committed not in the presence of the judge, you need to be summoned to answer for the charge of contempt. The charge of contempt itself needs to be detailed. It needs to contain all of the elements of what is going to be proven. How, when, why, where. There has to be disclosure and communication of evidence that the prosecutor or the party seeking the contempt condemnation has to disclose to the accused. Quasi-criminal procedure means that the allegations have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the criminal threshold, not the civil threshold. So all this to say is, rarely, if ever, does all of this occur within a window of 5 hours, from the act to the trial, to the condemnation, to the sentencing. Even if there's a condemnation, there has to be a hearing on the sentencing. Which is why this entire situation was so mind-blowing when it occurred. And this is what people have to bear in mind when talking of contempt. It's not just a small thing we're talking about. We're talking about something that can actually end with prison time. Depriving someone of their liberty, the most important thing that someone can be deprived of. This is what it means to be quasi-criminal. And sentencing. Sentencing can range from a fine to actual jail time per infraction. So if someone's contemptuous behavior is repeated behavior, as in doing it day over day over day, if they're sentenced to jail time, they can stay in jail every day until they do or do not do what they're supposed to do or do not do. So if there's an order enjoining you to stop selling counterfeited products, each sale can count as a contemptuous act for the purposes of a contempt condemnation. The other thing about the sentencing, it's supposed to serve as a deterrent and or a punishment, but it's not supposed to be excessive. I gotta go visit my grandmother. I'll be back in a few minutes. Grandma? How's it going?
Hey!
Hey, hey! Grandma? Alright, and that guy who was jailed for 14 years for refusing to disclose his assets to his wife in the context of the divorce, the only reason he was let out of jail was because the judge determined that the penalty for the contempt no longer had a deterrent force on the guy.
Want any back? There's one.
Obligatory caveat, nothing in this video constitutes legal advice. If you think you need legal advice, consult an attorney in your jurisdiction or area. Also, like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Share this video. Share my channel with your friends. We do law vlogs at least once a week. Cooking videos, GoPro videos, fishing videos. I've been making daily videos for... It's over 2 years now. It's over 2 years. Now, I hope you've appreciated the lowdown on the contempt. Oh, gosh. I hope you've enjoyed the 411 30,000-foot view of contempt proceedings. Incidentally, after spending close to 3 months in jail, Tommy Robinson's contempt conviction was overturned and he was released. He's scheduled for resentencing, but you don't have to be a Tommy Robinson lover to have recognized that there was a procedural injustice in the whole procedure. And it's not because you hate him that you shouldn't care. You should care about procedural injustices regardless of whether or not the subject is someone you love or hate. An injustice today for someone you hate may be an injustice tomorrow for someone you love. Write that down. Peace out.